There, Elizabeth.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How you doing?
Good, good, good. Hey, everyone. We're just giving it a couple of minutes as we still have attendees trickling in. I see some notes about having issues hearing. We just hadn't started yet, but we are here.
Sure
Hello,
are.
hello.
Gee, where are you quarantining right now?
I am quarantining in good old New Jersey, so not much better than New York. How
Oh.
about you?
I'm in Connecticut, in Darien, Connecticut, sitting in the kitchen.
Right. All right. All right. Great. 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 All right, Liz, I think that as others trickle in, maybe we can get started and kick this thing off.
Yeah,
That's good. All right.
sounds good to me.
Beautiful. All right. So hello, everybody. Hello, hello. First and most importantly, I hope you and all of your teams are safe and healthy during this unprecedented time. If you're here and wanting to talk, you already took the right first step. You're looking for more information and you want to understand what you're dealing with. Most brands, and more specifically people, really aren't wired to function in a crisis. That's where webinars and even open forums come into play. They allow you to hear from people who have seen it, like Elizabeth and myself, and be in an audience that reminds you that you aren't alone. So thank you so much for joining us today. We are really excited to get started. One really quick housekeeping note before we kick off. We are going to be opening up Q&A at the end of the presentation. So however, we do want you to send us your questions. It's located at the bottom of your screen in Q&A. So if you just, as you're kind of thinking through, or if you hear something that kind of triggers a thought, a comment, question, whatever it is, please feel free to send them through and we will make sure that we address them at the end. This is meant to be a totally informal discussion and will be treated that way. So it's an opportunity for all of us to get together, learn a little something along the way. Without further ado, Elizabeth, I'm going to kick it over to you.
Alrighty. Hi, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Couch, and I spearhead our mid-market and enterprise sales here at Cohley. For those who don't know, we're a software platform that helps brands scale their content strategies. So everything from iPhone videos to professional photography to text reviews, and then we tell you what's working and what's not to help improve your digital performance. I specialize in particular in beauty and personal care partnerships, both of which are two of our largest and most popular verticals on Cohley.
Great, perfect. So hello, I'm Jonna Cheza. I'm Executive Vice President of Behrman Communications. I feel really proud to work for this agency. We are a New York City communications agency that specializes in beauty, health, and wellness. I oversee brands that live across each of these sectors, and they vary from startups to household names. In addition to media relations, strategy, and new product launches, we also specialize in messaging and strategic positioning. Most importantly, especially for this conversation, we lead the agency's crisis management efforts.
So, why are we here today? Today, we're here because of a situation that puts everyone on this webinar on an even playing field. We're all dealing with the challenges and trends of the beauty in the beauty industry brought on by COVID-19. There is no definitive playbook for marketing through a pandemic, although it would make things a lot easier if there was. So we need to make our own. So today we'll be offering insights and tips on the following topics to help assist with your marketing plans. First, what brands should be considering from a media, content, influencer perspective when adjusting to changes in the industry. Secondly, new trends that have been emerging and old trends that have accelerated through the pandemic. Thirdly, how brands can adapt to these changes and trends. And then finally, what to do now that the assessment phase is over.
Okay, all right. So that was kind of like a table of contents to give you an idea of the sort of content that we're going to go over. And I think with that, we can move right on into the discussion kickoff. So the first question on all of our minds is, what do brands need to be considering when adjusting to the changes in the industry? The short answer is everything. But from a professional standpoint, it's really about understanding the shift and controlling the uncontrollable, which in times like these seems impossible. So first step is we need to understand what has changed, and we need to adjust our communication plans accordingly. This is the utmost important first step. And the reason for that is a lot of you have spent your careers studying a certain kind of customer and their purchasing buying habits. Those habits have essentially changed overnight. So it's really important that you are considering what adjustments have to be made with those new behaviors, because that customer who you knew, you might no longer know. And the reason you don't know them is they're changing their behaviors, they're changing their day-to-day perspective on what's important versus what might not be important. And your marketing plan needs to shift with that. The rules of operating in a pandemic are the same as one would be when you're operating in a crisis. As I mentioned earlier, not everybody is used to operating in a crisis. So the first step is you got to make sure that you admit that you're in one and that you need some help. Once you understand and look at where that shift is starting to navigate, it's important then you take your brand plans and you apply it to that new setting. A lot of conversations that we're having right now that I think are really important to bring up are what was planned pre-pandemic isn't necessarily what's right during the pandemic. And nobody likes change. Even if you say that you're okay with it, it's a really hard thing to adjust, especially when you're talking about communications plans and how you want to filter your brand to your target audiences. So what I've been sharing with a lot of our clients is it's out with the olds and what you thought was right and in with the right now. And that doesn't mean that whatever you had planned is never going to come to fruition. It just means that you're very easily placing it on the back burner for now. And you're going to have the necessary conversations to get yourselves through the pandemic. And then maybe you can shift to what old strategy was at a later date. But I think it's safe to say that everyone understands that what is best for your brand and setting a targets on its back is the most important thing that you can do. And a lot of different brands go about doing this in different ways. But the first point of ensuring that you are on the right road is taking a look at that communication strategy and saying, okay, I understand where the shift is. I think I know what my target consumer wants. Let's start a discussion.
Yeah, great. So in terms of what brands need to consider when adjusting to a lot of these changes, I want to first talk about content. So people, myself included, love to use the phrase content is king, right? Especially now when we're in a crisis. But if we really believe that and want to approach content in a strategic manner, we need to consider two things. First, you need a fire hose of compelling content on a consistent basis to fill what seems like endless digital channels. And two, you need to constantly be evaluating how your content is actually working so you can adjust your strategy according to the data. So, with regard to the first point, the global pandemic has resulted in two major problems regarding content. So, one, content demands have increased tremendously as screen time has come to an all-time high. And two, actually getting that content is more difficult than ever with no access to things like photo shoots and with everyone in their homes. So, in short, brands first need to find a way to get that content without breaking social distancing policies. And then they need to ensure also that that content is authentic, it's relevant to what's going on in the world, and it's compelling, right? So speaking to the beauty industry specifically, I mean, there are more brands than ever vying for consumers' attention. Just think about how many brands consider themselves and market themselves as a clean beauty brand. So how do you stand out in that crowd? You only have a few seconds, if that, to capture a person's attention, especially when they're being served hundreds of pieces of content per minute across multiple channels. And then on top of that, you need to get a ton of content to keep up with the demand. right? So with regard to the second point, having the content itself is kind of only half the battle. We also need to pay attention to how it's performing. And what that means is you really need to be plugged into the KPIs of your content and ready to pivot as you start to notice trends in what your consumers are engaging with and what they're not. And now that everything has shifted to digital, we have access to tangible and concrete information on what our consumers like to see. So we can't solely be focused anymore on being quote unquote on brand. I mean, it's the beauty industry, right? So that's a kind of a hard pill to swallow, but now more than ever, data has to be the priority over gut feel every single time. And then just to quickly touch on the influencer portion of things, I'll get into this a little bit more later on in the conversation, but for now, it's really important, I think, for brands to start wrapping their heads around the fact that influencers do not translate to sales more often than not, right? Now more than ever, it is just not the time to be pushing product. And not just because it comes off as obviously somewhat tone deaf, given what's going on in the world, but also because it usually doesn't work, right? We want to start shifting our way of thinking about influencers as just one of several touch points to help sway a person's decision to purchase.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That makes sense, Liz. I think you said something really important there when you talked about the data really driving, the decisions that you're making. And that goes for connecting with influencers, creating your content, and whittling it all the way down to brand messaging, right? So we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but it's not necessarily that the brand story is changing, right? But your approach to how you're telling it certainly is going to. And I think that you made a really good point about influencers and how they're a piece of the larger package, right? And when you use them the right way, when you have professionals who are able to kind of steer you in the direction that your brand should be going, especially during a time like this, which is absolutely vital, you can really hit a home run when it comes to PR marketing.
Absolutely.
Okay, so our next topic and question, if you will, talks a little bit about, are there trends emerging given the current climate and changing consumer behavior? What does that mean for brands? I feel like trends happen and grow and come out of nowhere literally every single day. But this pandemic has been so fascinating to study and watch, especially as it relates to this industry. Because yes, of course, there are absolutely new trends and things that we would have never thought, we'd all be subjected to that are happening day in and day out. So I think that one of the biggest trends that we are seeing on our sides is this beauty on hand and at home movement, right? So at one point or another, typical target consumers had access to a plethora of products in a myriad of ways, right? So they could go to their Ulta Beauty, they could go to their Sephora, they could go to their Walgreens, or see wherever they want, wherever they needed to purchase the products that they love most, pick it up very easily, bring it home, try it out, use it, and call it a day. We're not living in that time right now. So it's really all about kind of the grab and go and minimizing the amount of travel time in between. That has shifted the market into thinking, okay, what do I have at home that I can use right now? And how can I do it myself? As I mentioned, access to retail is limited. That's going to be normal. But those same people are also heading to Stop and Shop, ShopRite, it depends on where you are in the country, but grocery stores or Walgreens, CVS, to pick up all of their essentials. So really, we're living in a moment where it's get your beauty with your toilet paper. The deeper trend emerging is working with, what do you have right here, right now? Elizabeth, we were chatting earlier, and I think a really good example is the fact that last week you cut your own hair. Now it looks like you did a great job. It looks fantastic, but that's probably something that you would have never done if you could have accessed the salon. Is that correct?
100%.
And you and the rest of America are turning to solutions like that. I myself, I had to order my Zoya manicure kit because I was looking down at my nails saying, oh my goodness, I'm getting on these Zoom calls, I'm talking with the media and clients, and I'm showing these products, and they're looking at the back of my hand and they're seeing my nails and they look awful. And I am not one to do my own nails. However, I sat down after dinner, I watched the tutorials, I taught myself how to do it, and then I did something interesting, and this is what it fascinated me, because I realized that I was a target consumer in an industry that I feel like I know like the back of my hand at this point. It was the show me how mentality. I sat at my counter and I said to myself, I could do this. Never thought that I'd have to do it, nor do I want to do it, but I can totally do this. Like if I can do public relations, I can do my nails. So with this emergence of beauty on hand comes that do-it-yourself mentality. And I'm not talking about, I didn't make nail polish in my kitchen. I didn't start mixing and matching. I'm no mixologist over here. I got the materials that I needed from the brands that I trust. And then I took matters into my own hands and I did my own nails. Third-party experts and trusted resources have become a necessity when it comes to this phase. Reason being, when I thought to myself, okay, show me how, I did two things. I went to the brand social media pages and basically watched every tutorial that I possibly could. And then I turned to the influencers who are experts in this space, who live and breathe nail care. And I said to myself, okay, I know who I trust in this realm. I'm going to turn to them. I'm going to watch what they are doing, and I'm going to then apply it in my own home. So the show me how mentality is really interesting for sure. Elizabeth, why don't you tell us a little bit about the importance of influencers when it comes to that response?
Yeah, absolutely. So with regard to influencers, brands lately and more now than ever are leaning into influencer marketing to deliver relevant and consistent messages that keep their audience engaged amidst the pandemic. So in particular, we've seen our clients leveraging influencers, especially right now, given what's going on, for consumer education, on the one hand, and then also feel good messaging on the other hand. So when I talk about consumer education, like Jonna was just mentioning, with no access to services like haircuts and coloring, manicures, facials, people are now at the point where they're looking to find ways to do this on their own and to keep up with their routine and maintain their physical appearance. Like pandemic or not, people will always be vain. Am I right? So they're looking to influencers to educate and really just learn how to do it themselves. And then the other point here is feel good messaging. So a lot of our clients are actually affiliated with charitable organizations and other amazing causes. Some people are, converting their factories to help produce hand sanitizer, produce masks, you name it, right? And so leveraging influencers to let your community know that, at the core of your business are human beings, that can really help humanize your brand. So that's something really interesting we've been seeing on the influencer front. With regards to content, a couple of the trends that we're noticing given the climate is heightened focus on video content. I think across the board, we've all kind of come to the conclusion that video content is it's way more engaging. It helps bring your brand to life. It helps educate consumers on, how certain products work. Using the hair care example again, no one wants to see a static image of someone holding up a curling iron. Like, show me how to use it so I don't burn my ears. Because every time I burn my ears, right? And then in that vein, we've got TikTok, which has popped up, and that's been huge right now. Another thing is authenticity and relatability, right? So we want to we want our clients as much as possible to be using real people in their content, right? Again, bringing it back to humanizing your brand and diversifying your content. The more people you work with, the more likely it is, and you're leveraging that in ads or in email marketing or what have you, right? The more diversity and the more people you involve, the more likely it is that a piece of content is going to resonate with a consumer, maybe unexpectedly, right? People like to see real people in your products.
Absolutely.
And just kind of last point on that, like, it's important to also note that anybody can be a creator nowadays. So think about it. Like, the new iPhone 11 their camera is crazy, right?
Mm-hmm.
How many people do you follow right now, especially during the pandemic, who are now getting into new hobbies and baking and trying new skincare routines, and everyone's posting on their Instagram more than ever, right? So
Yep.
you don't necessarily have to be an influencer or have a huge following to be a creator, which has been a really cool thing that we've been seeing over the years, but especially now more than ever.
It's probably really cool for you to watch, but then in the same sense, it could maybe be a little bit scary too, intimidating, because you want to make sure that these brands are connecting with the right people, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I think that you hit like the golden nugget of content when you said that you have to really, really focus in on paying attention to the data that's at hand, and making sure that you are coming off as, you said in so many words, but it's really about coming off as authentic, right, to your customer. And you have to realize that you as a brand are going through this pandemic, and it's awful for all of us, but that core customer, they're going through it too. And to be able to turn to a brand that you trust and who is offering almost a helping hand and a shoulder to lean on, if you will, and that, go forward, we've got this together attitude, it goes a really long way. And customers, and they feel like they can connect with that. That's where brand messaging is so important.
Absolutely.
For sure. Okay. The next topic we're going to chat through is how can brands adapt to these trends and the overall changes. So we just talked a little bit about what we're seeing and what we really feel like is starting to become a trend in the within the industry. But where do they start? Where do brands start, and how do they adapt, and what can they do to make the best of it? From a public relations communications perspective, for us, it always starts with the messaging. You know your story, but you also have to know what needs to change. And one important call out here that I think sometimes the message gets a little bit lost is that the story never changes. The approach does. So you are always going to be being yourselves and telling your authentic truth, and being able to deliver to your customers the way that you have, whether you're into your household, no matter how long you've been in business, you have a core value that you need to uphold. And we all respect and understand that. But the way that you are approaching your customers and the way you are approaching your target audiences, that is where the adjustment needs to happen. So I mentioned before, and I want to bring it up again because I feel like a broken record sometimes when I'm on phone calls, because I find myself repeating this one line over and over and over because it's so true. What you planned pre-pandemic is not the strategy for mid-pandemic. It can come later. It's not a problem, but you need to think through everything that is going on in your brand from start to finish and understand that in the new world that you are living in of COVID-19, what has to happen, what can happen, and what is not appropriate to happen. So I'm a big advocate of making adjustments to the plan at first, making sure that you're getting the crux of the information that you want shared out there, and then adjusting along the way. Nobody's perfect. You're not going to make a perfect plan straight out of a crisis or a pandemic, but when you're dealing within a crisis scenario, the first step is knowing your first step. So those adjustments they're really key. Another important point here, again, from the PR marketing side of things, is Don't forget the importance of showing interest in the people who you're looking to connect with. Build a community. There is no better time than right now when you know that not just your customers, not just everybody is at home, and they are generating, they are taking in content, and they are listening closer than they ever have, and they are paying attention, and they are acutely aware of what is going on. There is so much that lies there because there is an inherent desire to want to learn and to want to know more. And for the first time, they're not traveling on the train into the city with the cell phone in their hands around a chaotic train car, talking to their neighbor, walking out, remembering that they might have left the flat iron on before they left their apartment. All of these things aren't happening right now. So where your target consumer is. Build the community. It's going to be important because post-pandemic, the community that you spent time getting to know and that you spent value, let's call, some people can spend dollars. Right now we're living in a pandemic. That's not always the case. Charity work is always amazing, but that sort of thing, it sticks, and it sticks post-pandemic. Last but not least, I would say a priority from a communication structure would be to talk to your audience like human beings. Allow them to explore your brand on their terms. Remember, those terms have changed. So be open with them, communicate with them, and then allow them to explore.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's great. And I mean, when it comes to influencers and content, I think a lot of that holds true as well. So, just speaking about influencers to start, we really need to start approaching, if we haven't already, influencer related initiatives through the lens of content creation rather than direct response. There's a reason that the industry has shifted to calling influencers content creators. That's what they do best, right? So lean on them for that. Lean on them to create that relevant, authentic content for you, and use it in your email marketing, in your ads, even on your site. So many of our clients are realizing, they didn't necessarily need to ever be spending tens of thousands, if not more, dollars, on professional shoots. They're using influencer content on their website, and hey, guess what? It's a lot more engaging.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And so, by this point, most marketers have started to understand the massive impact of user-generated content. But just as a quick example, a lot of different research across the board has shown that 77% of e-commerce buyers, just going off of the website example, prefer user-generated photos to professional ones, right? And featuring user-generated photos can actually lead to an increase in conversion rates of up to 25% as compared to pages that only feature professional ones, right? So on our end at Cohley, we actually just launched as Yotpo's official content partner. And what that partnership does is actually allow us to send the content you've gotten through your Cohley campaigns, either through influencers or other types of creators, and send that content right to your Yotpo integration so you can fill your on-site UGC galleries with compelling and diverse content. So that's just one of the ways that brands can start adapting to these trends and what's going on right now. And then from a content perspective, the most important thing is testing, right? So you are never going to know what your consumers like to see until you try it. You need to make sure that whoever is handling the activation of your content, so whether you're working with an agency, whether you do it in-house, what have you, they need to be talking to whomever is handling the creation of your content. Whether you're doing that in-house, whether you use a platform like Cohley, the right hand needs to be talking to the left, right? So for example, like on Cohley, we work very closely with our clients and their performance marketing teams to ensure that, before we start a new project, we're understanding and analyzing content performance because, there are always going to be valuable insights. And it's really important to pay attention to those insights before starting to pump out new, fresh content.
Such a good point.
Yeah. And so, I mean, to that end, there's also, we've noticed, like I said, a heightened focus on video content and the shift towards more relatable and relevant content. So, one way that a lot of our clients have been adapting to that is really just loosening the reins a little bit. And again, hard pill to swallow for the beauty industry, right? You want everything to look beautiful. You're selling beauty, right? But a lot of our brands have really started to test things out that they never would have tried before, run a TikTok campaign, keep
Mm-hmm.
the principles that are most important to you. If there's a color scheme that needs to be in place, if there's, for video content, if there are key talking points that need to be hit on, fine. But otherwise, generally speaking, keeping an open mind and letting other people's creativity shine through will really help diversify the pool of assets you have. And then also, in that same vein, give you a lot more material to test out and just see what the heck it is works, right?
Yep, absolutely. Fair.
Yeah.
So fair. And I love that you talked about the left hand talking to the right hand,
Yeah.
right? I want to break that down actually just a little bit more before we go down into the next topic. But a lot of times you see there's a lack of streamline between PR marketing and that influencer content creation and outreach. And some brands do it right, and they nailed it, and they understand that it's all should be together and everyone should be complementing one another. But I think for the purpose of this webinar, it's really important to call out, right? So it's important that when I know that you're generating influencers for a brand, and I'm on my side working on the brand messaging and how we want to be presented during a time like this. I'm the left hand, you're the right hand. We have to make sure we're talking. We have to make sure that we're connected and that we know what the other one is doing. Because the only way that you are going to be able to successfully find the influencers that can make an impact for the brand is if you understand what the message is we're trying to convey.
Absolutely.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that, it sounds like we have a very similar, from an agency to agency perspective, we have a very similar onboarding process. So, at Behrman, when we're really taking a look at a crisis as we are today, like I mentioned before, the first step is we sit down and we say, what is your story? Who are you? And what do you want to be? We want to get inside of that brain, that beautiful concept of your brand, of what you've created. And we want to understand it from the ground up. Once that education comes to fruition, then we're able to make the next move of saying, okay, this is what you can do. This is what you can't right now. And this is what we're going to put on the back burner from when we're out of crisis. And then we're able to take it from there.
Love it.
Cool. Okay. Great. So the last topic for review before we go into Q&A is talking about acting now. So the assessment phase is over. What does that mean? So as everybody, I'm sure, has been watching the days go by, we are all fully and acutely aware that after 6+ weeks in quarantine, we understand that we're going to be home for a while. And at this stage, I can probably say very comfortably on this call for all the brands and all of the executives who have joined us that you're prepared to take action. You have an idea of what's going on. You understand it and you know it. What does that look like? So if you have the ability to, you talk to the professionals. You give them a moment, give them a synopsis of what's going on with your brand. Get that third party understanding. I think that that's incredibly important, only because a third party, someone who is not connected with your brand, who is not in the daily workings of the day in, day out, what's going on, is going to have a very different perspective on certain scenarios, especially like the one that we're living in today, than somebody internally, right? Because they're kind of an extension. You want to approve your messaging plan as it stands for the duration of COVID, knowing and understanding that it is going to change. So the first step for PR marketing is you look at your strategy, you look at your messaging, and then you start to chop it up into sections. No, let's say that there are 4 sections in one plan, just for argument's sake. The first section is going to be you're going to hit it on the head. You're going to be able to execute, no problem, not an issue. By the time you get to section 2, 3, and 4 of what you're releasing out to your customers, it's probably going to change. You're going to need to make tweaks. You're going to see what performed really well from the first section, and you're going to want to apply it to section 2, 3, and 4. This is all about the messaging. What worked? What got your customers' attention? What got them to purchase? What didn't? Once you lay that out, approve the plan. Push forward. Find the route that's going to take you to sales during a crisis. And it's a really hard route to find, but it's not impossible. This is my favorite part. Now we queue up the media. So all of that messaging that we spent probably way too much time overthinking and considering and going through all the different scenarios, it's time to queue it up. It's time to share it with the media. Let them advocate on your behalf. So at Behrman, we believe in allowing the press to garner the awareness on your behalf. You know, we want to work with our closest relationships at the top magazines and .coms like Refinery29, Bustle.com, Birdie, Cosmo, Vogue, Allure, you name it. We want those guys showing their own customers that this is the product that they are picking and why. That third-party credibility is some of the best. It's a golden nugget, right? Because your publicist isn't the only one saying it. The influencers aren't the only ones who are saying it. It's that third-party credibility of saying, I'm putting my stamp of approval on this. And I think it goes a long way. It goes a really long way. So, and it probably, actually, I should say, just to back it up for a minute, you want to make sure that the message is heard, and what better way than to work with a third party who has an audience that's listening. Next up would be to connect with the professionals. So review your strategy, make sure that you're connecting with the right people. When we talk about professionals now, I'm more so talking about your KOLs. That's an added portion to that third-party credibility. It's not just about the outlets; it's also about your estheticians, depending on your sector of the industry. But it could be estheticians, it could be hairstylists, it could be makeup artists, it could be physicians. Let them know what you're doing during these sorts of times, and even better, if it benefits them. Sing that from the rooftops, because very simply, they're going to get on board. And when they get on board, they will act as your third-party advocates. And you end up making a really nice community of people who aren't just looking for their next payday. They care and they want to grow with the brand.
Absolutely. I think the same is definitely true with influencers as well.
Absolutely. You're right. 100%. They are third-party advocates. You want them in your corner, right? Mm-hmm. The challenge that we're seeing, and I see that there's a question about that, which we'll, touch base on in just a little bit. But the challenge for big and small players is, how do we identify the lasting trends, the new normal? What does that look like? For the first time in probably our industry's history, an indie beauty brand and a household brand have leveled the playing field. They're all playing the same game. So when you're looking at identifying those lasting trends and the new normal, make sure that you do not overcorrect. I've had this conversation a few times, and it's made me eyes wide open, where I'm like, oh, wow, I have to make sure that I include this in all of my client discussions, because you so badly want to correct what's going wrong that you overcorrect it and you end up on the wrong side of it still. So we're seeing a lot of trends right now. Absolutely. Some will stay, some will go. We can certainly talk through what some of those trends could look like. But make sure that you have a really good grasp and handle on what that means for your brand specifically, and what trends you can really lean into.
Love it. Okay. Yeah, so on my end, what to do now that the assessment phase is over. So I can't stress this enough, but planning ahead is going to be more important than ever when it comes to your content, right? And that's not to say plan out what each piece of content is going to contain or anything like that, right? Because you might need to change your messaging in a couple of weeks when some other crazy bit of news comes out, right? But if it hasn't happened already, you'll probably start noticing very soon that your content has started to run dry. And like it or not, that will have a ripple effect across your marketing channels. Ad performance will start to flatten, engagement on social will decrease, you name it, right? And so with that knowledge, it's very important to be proactive and think about, how am I going to get my content now that, like I said, photo shoots, they're not accessible. Like, you can't go to the office and use your mini studio shoot that you have in the office anymore, right?
Right.
And so we really are encouraging our clients to plan as though, what if another quarantine ends up happening during flu season, right?
Yeah.
Plan for photo shoots to still be called off. Plan to be back in the not be back in the office rather for a while. And that way, if any or all of those things end up happening, you're prepared and set up for success in the long term. And I think something that a lot of our clients, and I alluded to this earlier, are noticing now that, we're in this situation, it's, hey, maybe I don't need to be, doing all of these photo shoots. Maybe I don't need to be dropping the kind of money I have been, right? And
Yep.
I think that is actually a really valuable takeaway from this pandemic.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I did really want to note is just be open to new things when it comes to content and when it comes to influencers. It may be scary, but really I would encourage everybody to just embrace the unknown. We're living in uncertain times, and now is not the time to adhere to old standards of whether that's, needing to be on brand or what have you. Now is the time to embrace a new data-driven approach to your content, to working with influencers, and to try something that you might never have envisioned for your brand, but could in reality be a game changer in the long run.
It's a great call, Liz. It's a really great call.
Thanks.
Okay, so for the last 10 or so minutes of the webinar, we're going to answer a few questions. If we don't have the opportunity to answer everything during this time, we will make sure that we have follow-up out to everybody and that you can use this as a resource as you need. We're all in this together. Liz, would you like me to read off the first question?
Yeah, please.
Great. So let's see here. This is from Sasha. I'm curious to hear thoughts on how beauty will change through all of this. I'm interested in how the old standards of beauty might be changing right now and how we will align with our audience depending on how people's perception and priorities shift. Will we go back to our fully manicured self after this? Or whether the resetting of priorities means we won't be as focused on staying so manicured. Liz, do you want to take this one first?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Great question.
I mean, just as a personal anecdote, I'm kind of loving some of the natural, no gel manicure. My nails have healed incredibly after all of the damage I've done to them. And of course, times are going to be different. They're going to be forever changed. I don't envision us getting to a point where everything is perfectly back to the way it once was. Yeah. But like I said, and this is something that I've been told kind of my whole life, like, people will always be vain no matter what is going on. So if they're not going to get, a gel manicure once every 2 weeks, fine, that might be changing, but they're sure as that they're gonna be figuring out ways to do it on their own at home.
Yeah. So I guess then to that question's point, what you're essentially doing, you're agreeing that on the latter half of it, that the resetting of priorities really might mean that we're not necessarily not as focused on staying so manicured, but we might not be as focused on having somebody else do it for us.
Agreed. That was a
It's
great
kind of like you're going to be taking it into your own hands. I see that. I totally see that as a trend. Listen, if I could call out all of the potential trends that were definitely going to stick post pandemic, we'd be in a really, really good spot right now. Like, I would feel like probably the smartest person in the world. However, that's virtually impossible. But I think that there are a couple of trends that are likely to stick. For example, on the communication side, we are seeing a lot of talk around detox and what that means, because right now we're living in a very, when I say clean, I don't mean like natural green. I mean literally physically being clean, as in not dirty. That is of the utmost priority right now to the target consumer. And I think that while the messaging gets a little bit convoluted, what we're seeing is this potential shift to looking for content like removes toxins. Anything that can make you feel cleaner or disinfect. I think that you're going to start seeing a lot more of that when it comes to a messaging standpoint, and it's going to be a sticking point with customers because right now their brains are being wired to think that way. We're obviously seeing a ton of stuff right now around hand care. Hand care is really actually becoming the new self-care. So lo and behold, you heard it here first, unless you're already thinking it. Nails are probably about to have their day in a big, big, big way, because when you're constantly washing your hands or using antibacterial soaps, your hands start to dry out in a big, big way. And you don't want, and then you get the cracking and it doesn't feel good and it doesn't look attractive. You get that whole, the stigma that comes with it. But I think that we're going to see a trend of the hand care becoming the new self-care and really understanding what your hands need to survive, if you will. I talked a little bit about this trend earlier, but I think it's important to bring back up is kind of how we are, the beauty category as a whole is sort of blending into this whole OTC side of the business. So, where you can get your toilet paper right now is really where you need to be getting your beauty, because right now we're not able to make the stops that we would typically stop. I don't see that trend going away. Reason being convenience. Sheer convenience. I think that people are starting to understand what is convenient to them versus what is not. I mean, listen, people like myself are still going to go to our specialty beauty stores or go online and do a quick order for a product that we cannot get enough of. That's never, I don't believe that's ever going to go away. But I think we're going to see the convenience factor really start to come to a head. I have a million more trends, but I'm going to stop there just so we can get through a few more questions. Okay, next question. We are interested especially in the clean and wellness topics. What consumers' needs can we address as a skincare company? Liz, do you want to take this one first?
Sure. Yeah, so I think actually what you mentioned, you making the distinction between clean as meaning natural,
yep,
and then clean meaning actually physically clean, right? And so
you're going to start to see this like crossover, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And so when it comes to consumer needs, I mean, I think you have to consider both pieces of the puzzle, right?
Right.
How can you position your brand as, something that's good for you, something that is, natural and clean and doesn't have toxins, it's cruelty free, EWG certified, you name it, right?
Yep.
But also, if there's a way in which you can also pivot things to, be a little bit more centered around maybe we say it clean versus cleanliness or something like that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. That's a great thought actually right there.
Right.
I think step one would be, someone like myself would walk into the room and say, okay, we are clean beauty at heart. This is who we are as a brand. We are a wellness focused skincare company. How do we make sure that messaging is crossed over into being safe for you to, safe for you to use, but clean in the other sense? And being able to kind of cross market those messages, so then that plan can be delivered to someone like you, who are able to go out and make the messaging happen with the influencers.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that a lot of for that question specifically, a lot of this has to do with how you're messaging to your core customers, and what your perception of clean is going to be during the pandemic and post-pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's also a question here, G, that's specifically for you. So
Sure. You want to hit me with that one? I haven't seen that one yet.
yeah, so from a trend perspective, Jonna, have you seen AR/VR come up in this industry? Is there something that is this something you've experienced, and what are your thoughts?
Oh, yes. Yes. The more creative that you can get. This is also, listen, this is not anybody's ideal. Nobody wants to be, working through a crisis. Coming from somebody who, I live and breathe that sector, it's not a fun one to be in, but man, the exploration is there. So if you are already in a stage where you have brought yourself digital, you have that core community, you're able to really push activations through and through to them, absolutely. The more creative that you can get in this environment, the better. And AR, VR, anything within that realm is a way just to really one up your competitors. Right now, a lot of what we're doing is virtual, for sure, from a PR perspective. So, for us, it's how do we stay ahead of the curve? How do we keep getting creative? We were truly one of the first agencies that were really leading the charge pre-pandemic on making all of our activations that were set for Q2 and Q3 virtual. That was a huge first step. And we had the media coming back to us saying, do you guys really think that this is going to be that bad? And I remember sitting at my desk being like, I think that we have to fasten our seatbelts because this is going to be a situation. And so to answer your question clearly, yes, I've had experience with it. Yes, I absolutely recommend it. And it is my belief that if you can get more creative during this times in a virtual setting, the better off you're going to be.
For sure. I think we've got time for one more.
Okay, great.
So I think this one's good. So what do we think about supplements? Will these continue to grow in popularity? I mean, I can start out with that.
Sure.
It's one of the fastest growing industries, and one that's actually seen a huge spike in sales recently. So yes, I very much do think that they will continue to grow in popularity. And I think a lot of that really just has to do with, again, people are turning to different ways to protect themselves from, any kind of health related circumstances, right? Like people want to try out the latest supplement that might help them, combat X, Y, and Z, or even things like if we're just talking about beauty, like supplements around, like biotin supplements and what have you, like a lot of time people are using actually this period of time to work on things like that, like work on growing their hair out, right? And
Absolutely.
exactly.
I love ingestible beauty. This is like my category.
Yeah. I love it. So yeah, I think we'll absolutely be seeing this continue to grow, and new competitors start to pop up as well, for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And listen, the supplement category, to your point, Liz, it's not going anywhere. If anything, it is growing, and it is growing at a rapid pace. And that's everything from beauty through nutrition. I think that the general US consumer right now, they are hungry to be healthy. And the way that their brain is wired is, if I take my supplements, I'm going to be okay. So because they're starting to see that trend, or because they're starting to understand that that is actually truly the case, right? That's why you're seeing an increase in probiotics. There are brands out there who are crushing it during this time. And it's very simply because their messaging is good for you supplements, right? Look at a brand like Cohley Nutrition. They have been doing a fantastic job during this pandemic. They are reaching their target consumer. They are talking about a household ingredient that everybody knows and loves, and they are making it easier to ingest. There are other brands, like hair brands, let's say Nutrafol. Nutrafol is doing a phenomenal job of talking to their target consumers in two totally different capacities. They have a B2B business, and they also have a B2C business. So they're talking to their customers, and then they're also right tracking and talking to their professionals in the way that's necessary. I think that supplement brands are here to stay. And if anything, I think that COVID-19 has given them a leg up and really elevated the overall experience within this industry.
Yep.
With that said, it is 3 p.m. our time. I believe that we are all set here, but thank you so much, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you, everyone, for joining.
We'll make sure that our contact information is shared out should you have any follow-up questions, and we'll make sure to follow up on some of these Q&As after this. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye, Liz.
Bye, G.